It all started on an ordinary night. My husband, Carlos, had invited two close friends, Joao and Pedro, to dinner at our house. They were longtime friends, practically brothers, and whenever they got together, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and old stories. Joao was tall, charming, with a charming smile, while Pedro, more reserved, had a calming presence and eyes that seemed to see the soul of whoever looked into them. The night was pleasant, and the conversation flowed with laughter and shared stories. The table was full of delicious dishes that I had lovingly prepared. Carlos, always excited, talked about his youthful adventures, making everyone laugh. I felt good in the midst of that joy. But there was something different in the air that night. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the way Joao and Pedro looked at me, more attentive, more intense than usual. After dinner, we went to the living room. The conversation continued lively, now with glasses of wine in hands and a more relaxed atmosphere. Carlos, exhausted after a long day of work, decided to retire to his room early. He kissed me on the forehead, wishing me a good night, and went up the stairs with slow, heavy steps. Joao, always so perceptive, noticed my look, a mixture of concern and curiosity. "He's pretty tired, isn't he?" commented Joao, while Pedro nodded in silence. "Yeah, he's been working a lot lately," I replied, trying to distract from the worry I felt. When Carlos went to sleep, the three of us were left in the living room, and the atmosphere gradually changed. We continued to talk and drink wine. Joao told funny stories from his childhood, and Pedro, with his calm and deep voice, shared jokes that made everyone laugh. With each sip of wine, I felt more relaxed, more at ease. The atmosphere slowly changed from friendly to something more intense. There was a tension in the air, a game of gazes that I had never felt before. I noticed the discreet looks of Joao and Pedro crossing each other, and, every now and then, turning to me with an intensity that made me blush. It was as if an invisible current of electricity passed between us, carrying something forbidden and irresistible. Joao, always so confident, was the first to make a suggestive comment. He smiled mischievously and commented on my appearance, complimenting the dress I was wearing. "You look beautiful tonight, Anna," he said with a twinkle in his eye. I felt my face heat up, and a part of me wanted to return the compliment, but I held back. Pedro, more shy, just watched, but it didn't take long for him to get involved too. He leaned a little closer, his eyes fixed on mine, as if he was waiting for a sign, a hint that this was more than just a night of talking. That tension was palpable, and with every second that passed, I felt more attracted to that situation. What was supposed to be just an ordinary night had turned into something full of possibilities, something I never could have predicted. As soon as he walked up the stairs, the atmosphere in the room began to change. We continued to talk and drink wine, but there was a different energy in the air. The laughs became quieter, the looks longer, and the smiles more meaningful. I settled down on the couch, trying to hide my growing nervousness. John and Peter were sitting close together, and their eyes met every now and then, as if they were sharing a silent secret. Joao, always so sure of himself, was the first to break the barrier of normality with a comment that caught me off guard. "You know, Anna, I always thought you had a special spark," he said, his voice low and husky. I felt my face heat up, but I tried to laugh it off, brushing the comment aside. "Ah, Joao, you and your jokes," I replied, but the tension in my stomach didn't ease. Pedro, on the other hand, was shyer, but his eyes followed me in a way I had never noticed before. He leaned a little closer, his deep gaze meeting mine. "Joao is right, Anna. You are really special," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The atmosphere slowly changed, from friendly to something more intense. The soft music playing in the background seemed to echo the rapid beat of my heart. There was a tension in the air, a game of gazes that I had never felt before. It was as if the room was charged with electricity, ready to explode at any moment. Joao, noticing my reaction, decided to go a little further. He got up and came to sit next to me on the couch, his proximity making my heart race even more. "Don't be nervous, Anna. We're just talking," he said, his smile full of intent. Pedro, more shy, just watched, but it didn't take long for him to get involved too. He walked over and sat on my other side, his eyes fixed on mine. The proximity of the two men made the air seem thicker, each breath heavier. "You guys are making me uncomfortable," I tried to joke, but my voice came out lower than I intended. John laughed softly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "No need to stay," he said. "We're all friends here." The tension was palpable, and with each passing second, I felt more drawn to the situation. What was supposed to be just an ordinary night had turned into something full of possibilities, something I never could have predicted. I looked from one to the other, feeling the irresistible attraction growing within me. Joao was the first to act. He slid his hand down my arm, a light touch, but one that sent waves of heat through my body. "Anna," he murmured, "you don't have to worry. We're all here because we want to be." Pedro, seeing Joao's initiative, approached even closer, his words almost a whisper. "We just want you to feel good," he said, his intense gaze making my heart race even faster. At that moment, I realized I was at a point of no return. The tension that had been building throughout the night was about to explode, and I no longer had the strength to resist. The room seemed to spin around us, and all I could think about was what was about to happen. The looks, the subtle touches, the words filled with desire. Everything contributed to crossing the line between friendship and something more. And that night, in our room, what seemed impossible became reality. The crowning moment was when Joao approached me. His words were a whisper in my ear. "Anna, you're irresistible," he said, his voice low and husky, sending a shiver down my spine. I felt his hot breath against my skin, and the simple touch of his hand on my shoulder seemed to set my entire body on fire. Pedro, seeing Joao's initiative, did not stay behind. He approached, his presence silent and intense. "Anna, you're special," he murmured, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my heart beat faster. The heat from their bodies next to mine created an electric current that passed between us, and the tension between us turned into an uncontrollable spark. We knew we were about to cross a dangerous line, but the pull was irresistible. It was as if we were in a game of cat and mouse, where the roles of predator and prey were mixed every second. My senses were on high alert. Every touch, every whisper increased the feeling of desire that was growing inside me. Joao ran his hand gently down my arm, his touch as light as a feather but full of promise. "You want this as much as we do," he whispered, and I could only nod, my voice catching in my throat. Pedro, bolder than I imagined, placed a hand on my waist, gently pulling me closer. "We're all here because we want to be," he said, his words echoing the sentiment in the air. The whispers and soft touches took us to our bedroom, where adrenaline and desire took over. Every step we took, The anticipation grew. Joao held my hand, his touch firm and comforting. Pedro was close behind, his presence silent but palpable. The bedroom door seemed like a portal to a world where the rules were different, where desire and passion dominated. Inside the room, the soft light from the lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Joao gently pulled me closer, his eyes meeting mine with an overwhelming intensity. "Anna, there's no going back now," he whispered, and I knew he was right. Pedro, always so attentive, approached from behind, his hands finding mine, his fingers intertwining with mine. "We're in this together," he murmured, and I felt a rush of adrenaline course through my body. It was as if all of our senses were amplified, every touch, every breath, every heartbeat. The moments that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and sensations. Adrenaline was running through our veins, and the desire was palpable, almost tangible. There was no turning back, and each of us was immersed in that dance of passion and desire, where time seemed to stop and nothing else mattered but the present moment. That night, in our room, what seemed impossible became reality. And while the world outside continued to spin, inside that room, we were trapped in a universe of our own where every touch, every whisper, every look carried the promise of something unforgettable. And so, we crossed the line with no regrets, just the pure and irresistible attraction that had led us there. In the bedroom, events unfolded intensely and passionately. The door closed behind us, creating a space isolated from the outside world. The soft light from the lamp created dancing shadows on the walls, increasing the feeling of intimacy and mystery. Joao and Pedro were close, their gazes fixed on mine, and I felt a mixture of excitement and guilt rise inside me. Joao was the first to approach, his hands finding their way to my waist, gently pulling me closer. His touch was at the same time soft and firm, transmitting a security that made me forget, even if momentarily, the guilt I felt. His lips met mine in a kiss full of desire and unspoken promises. His every movement seemed calculated to increase the tension between us, and my heart beat faster with every second. Pedro, always more shy, watched for a moment before joining us. He approached slowly, his hands touching my shoulders with a delicacy that made me shiver. "We're all in this together," he murmured, his deep eyes meeting mine. There was a connection between the three of us that was palpable, an invisible chain that bound us together and made every touch, every kiss, heighten the intensity of the moment. Excitement and guilt mixed inside me, creating a whirlwind of emotions I had never experienced before. The awareness that I was cheating on my husband was there, but the attraction and connection I felt with Joao and Pedro were irresistible. It was as if we were in a separate world where only the three of us existed and nothing else mattered. Their every touch seemed to leave deep marks on me, both emotionally and physically. Joao, with his confidence and security, explored every inch of my body with a desire that left me breathless. Pedro, with his shyness and care, complemented Joao's intensity with soft, gentle touches that made me feel desired in a completely new way. The connection between the three of us was palpable. Each movement felt synchronized, as if we were dancing a secret dance, ours alone. The kisses were hot and full of passion. Each touch increased the tension and desire. She felt each of them differently, but equally intensely. The mix of personalities and playing created an experience I knew I would never forget. It was a night that left deep marks on me. The intensity of the moment, the mix of emotions, and the connection with Joao and Pedro were something that changed my perception of myself and my desires. It wasn't just the physical excitement, but the realization of experiencing something forbidden and irresistible. It was as if a part of me that I didn't know existed had been awakened. And so, that night, in our room, the three of us created a separate world where only we existed. Every kiss, every touch, every whisper of desire and promises was burned into my memory, creating a memory that I would carry with me forever. Even though we knew it shouldn't have happened, the intensity of the moment and the connection between us made everything seem inevitable and, in a way, perfect. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of fear and euphoria. The room was bathed in the soft light of dawn, and everything seemed so peaceful, as if the night before had been just a dream. I looked around me and saw Carlos still sleeping soundly next to me, oblivious to everything. His breathing was calm and even, and he seemed so serene, so far removed from the storm of emotions I felt. My thoughts were a mess. The memory of last night came flooding back, bringing with it a wave of guilt and a spark of excitement. Joao and Pedro had been so intense, so present, that it was difficult to believe that all that had really happened. The weight of what I had done began to set in, but along with it, there was a feeling of euphoria, of having experienced something forbidden and unforgettable. Joao and Pedro said goodbye discreetly. I followed them to the door, our eyes meeting in a silence full of meaning. Joao, with his confident smile, gave me one last look that seemed to say, "This will stay between us." Pedro, more shy, shook my hand gently, his eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and understanding. "Everything will be fine," he murmured, and I just nodded, trying to believe his words. When the door closed behind them, the house returned to its normal state, but nothing seemed to be the same. Every corner of the house, every object, seemed to bear the mark of last night. I went up the stairs slowly, my thoughts still trapped in recent memories, and returned to the room where Carlos was still sleeping, oblivious to everything. I lay down next to him, trying to find some comfort in the normality of his presence. The secret remained between us, a silent pact that was never broken. We didn't talk about it, but the memory of that night was always there, like a shadow that followed us. Every time I see Joao and Pedro, there is a silent understanding, a reminder of that night that will never be forgotten. Joao, with his ever-present smile, sometimes gives me a look that makes me remember every detail. Pedro, in his most reserved way, always greets me with a light touch, his eyes telling me that he hasn't forgotten either. Life took its course, and I continued to live alongside Carlos, carrying with me the weight and euphoria of that secret. Guilt visited me at unexpected moments, but the memory of that night also brought a spark of something I couldn't define. It was like a part of me had been awakened, a part I never knew existed. And so, we move on, each of us keeping the silent pact of that night. The memory remains, sometimes painful, sometimes exciting, but always present. It's a secret we share, an invisible bond that binds us in a way no one else can understand. And every time I see Joao and Pedro, I don't need words to remember. The silent understanding is always there, a constant reminder of what we share and what can never be undone.